In the vein of first time for everything, I've never had Dee Snider, is it Dee Snider, Come On Feel the Noise as my walk-on music? I see a few nods. So, there's a first time for everything here at Out and Equal. How's the summit going for you all so far? Okay, super, super. And I hope you heard that in this very special session, if you are queer, you are walking out of here with some money in your pocket. Right? No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. You get $1. No, you get some really good knowledge and information. So I'm Dina Fidas, my pronouns are she and her, and I get to serve as our Chief Program and Partnerships Officer, as well as our Managing Director here at Out and Equal. Now, I am first generation American, and one of the mantras I was raised with is, one of the most important things you can ever do for anyone is help them get a job. And that was always a proxy for, before anything else, supporting somebody in their financial security, in their economic security. That's fundamental. Now, our community, the LGBTQ plus community, faces a number of structural barriers to financial security and economic empowerment. And we don't talk enough about that. And I think there's a misconception that, for example, working in corporate America is the great equalizer, because everyone has a story to tell of their socioeconomic background. Everyone does. And it's time for us to come out with those stories. It's also time for us to, at a scale previously not done, address these structural inequalities that have resulted in estimates of 1 in 3 transgender people living in poverty. The fact that those in same-gender relationships are more likely to face financial struggle and be unemployed. And so it's up to us to have a campaign to educate globally the LGBTQ plus community on these barriers and equip our community with the tools necessary to lean into economic empowerment. It's also up to us to educate those institutions that serve us of some of these fundamental barriers to our social and economic inclusion. And that includes identity documents for those who are trans or non-binary. It includes the fact that in the United States today, because the Equality Act has not been passed, we don't even have credit protections. There's also been a real dearth of research and understanding of the impacts at the individual level of a lack of economic empowerment or financial security and the impact on one's career moves. Here we are at Out and Equal. Well, how many of us have been in a position where we had to take the job, and figuring out how we show up, everything took a back seat to ensuring we could pay rent and pay those bills. And so every conversation that we have at a conference like this has to account for our financial security and our sense of economic empowerment. Now, admittedly, there has not been enough time and attention paid to these topics. And I think it was yesterday on stage, I talked about the notion of being unrelenting in our quest for change, unrelenting in our accountability that we hold ourselves to and each other. And a shining example of such accountability, of such a thirst to say, what else can we do? There's not enough happening in this space, came in the form of a phone call with somebody I'm about to welcome to the stage. So if I can ask that yes, there we go, nameplates, let's do this. Abigail Lovell, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Experian. Thank you. See, everybody gets their walk-on music. I would have probably chosen that over Dee Snider, to be honest. But you and your team called us and opened what has become an extraordinary conversation, and one that is resulting in a multi-year partnership, the likes of which we at Out and Equal have never seen before. So first, thank you. Thank you for being unrelenting in asking the tough questions and in saying not, look what we've accomplished, but what else can we do? And so we are very excited to talk here about this multi-year partnership in which we are going to finally bring to scale much of what I just outlined. A global education campaign, global research, kicking off here at Summit, and a global social media campaign, the likes of which we've never taken on before, to really reach people at all levels of their career and their own individual growth as folks who are looking at, in some cases, a significant uneven patchwork of laws and social circumstances that have perhaps held them back. So first, on behalf of all of Out and Equal, thank you to the Experian team, and welcome officially to this summit stage.
Thank you so much. Do you want to sit down?
Yeah, sure, let's sit down and chat.
I'm so happy to be here, and I have to say that that call was not just me. It was everybody from Experian in the audience, and Will Lewis, who is my partner in crime, sitting in the front row. Experian had a relationship with Out and Equal way before I got involved, and so I don't want to take credit for my team's hard work and relentlessness to be involved in LGBTQ issues, advocate for LGBTQ populations inside the walls of Experian, outside the walls of Experian. So I just want to make sure that I give credit where credit's due. Haha, get it? Credit. But I wanted to share with all of you what I shared with Dina at the pool party last night. Gosh, you guys seem, I'm not really facing you guys. The best people in the house. Which is, this is my first summit. And I have never been to I do a lot of events. I put on a lot of events. I've gone to a lot of events in my career. And this by far is the most inspiring event that I've ever been to in my whole career. And I also noticed something that I have never noticed in another event like this, which is I was in a couple of breakouts yesterday, and I saw people like madly taking notes on a panel that they were listening to. And what that tells me is that all of you are really engaged and you want to see change happen when you go back to your offices and your hometowns, right? That's really important that we take back what we can from this conference, and I'm learning to soak it all in and just be open-minded. And so I love seeing people taking notes because that means things are going to change, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a huge learning community here. And I love that if you had one snapshot of Summit, it's somebody furiously taking notes because they see the immediate transfer over to their day-to-day job. So thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. Utterly awesome.
Yeah, and we're also very privileged, I think, and very grateful to be part of sitting next to a lot of you at this conference in rooms and breakout sessions. We're a Titanium sponsor, but we know that all of the sponsors and all the participants, I'm just really grateful for all of you. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. You know, it's all about making connections, and so I really appreciate Out and Equal.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So we have a great session today. Are you guys ready? Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that you wanted to say or share?
No, I mean, I think it's time to buckle up because the diversity of folks that you are going to hear from is incredible. I think they touch on all aspects of career development, economic empowerment, financial security. And again, we're just so excited to have you here. Thank you to the entire Experian team. And so I will let them come on. I will let them come on stage. Okay. I don't know if you can apparently make a special request for Dee Snider or Twisted Sister. So the walk-on music. But thank you all again. Let's give Experian another round of applause.
Okay, y'all, we're gonna have some fun today. So we're gonna keep it really kind of light. I don't know what that is, but so. When we were planning this panel, we decided to have a very wide range of presenters. And so we have an athlete, we have an entrepreneur, we have a lot of different people. And the first people I'm going to bring on are the deck guys. So come on up, guys. Hello. Okay. So tell us about the Debt Guys.
We're the Debt-Free Guys.
Debt-Free Guys.
I'm David.
I'm John.
We are husbands and partners in crime. We're hosts of the Queer Money podcast. We have a backstory of being together for, well, we just actually celebrated 19 years together. But a year and a half after getting together, we were coming down from the puppy love, win the spouse phase, I think it was, we found ourselves on vacation in the mountains of Colorado, and we were fantasizing about buying land and building a home in the mountains as a vacation home, you know, the kind of place you take all your friends to, you let people use, all that. Driving down the mountain, going 65 to 75 miles an hour, we started talking about what we could afford. And that went from this fantasy conversation of buying land and building a home to buying something, to renting something long-term, to pulling up in our driveway, opening the door of our car, opening up the door of our home, walking down a flight of stairs into a basement apartment that we were renting, and saying to ourselves, we are physically and financially living in a hole. And we confessed to each other that we had $51,000 in credit card debt. And that was the beginning of our story of basically coming out about our financial situation, not only to ourselves, but to each other, because we had been hiding it. And that's why we basically have this mission of educating LGBT folks about the impact of money.
That's amazing.
I think the irony of that story is up until that point, we had a combined tenure in financial services of up to 15 years. So here we were helping other people prepare for retirement, improve their credit score, save to buy a house, put their children through school. We weren't practicing what we preached. And so it was kind of a smack in the face to realize, hey, you're doing as bad with your money as I'm doing with my money. We didn't think this could happen. How serendipitous. But what can we do? And so we came up with a plan to pay off our debt, and we did that in 2.5 years. And in that time, we realized that so many of our friends who were LGBTQ were struggling the same financially. They didn't all have credit card debt necessarily, but they all had some sort of financial struggle that was improved, or they were able to start working on it when we actually started to talk about it. And that's why we're excited that Experian is giving us the opportunity to have this conversation, because all of our financial security is founded on the idea of starting this conversation that most of us are too ashamed or too afraid to have.
Yeah, I think it's really important too, because thank you for sharing your story, first of all. And I think it's really important to recognize that a lot of populations have, they need to overcome barriers to financial success, right? And so you just shared that you had credit card debt. How long did it take you to accumulate $51,000 worth of debt? Was it credit card debt, or was it student debt, or was it both?
100% of our debt was credit card debt.
Okay.
It took me about a year to amass about $35,000 of that debt. David acquired that over 17 years through nickel and diming himself.
Okay, that makes sense. So Dina threw out a research, like a stat from a research paper that she saw around a third of transgender people in the U.S. live in poverty. I think that might be a little bit of an older stat, but still, it's important. And then there's slower COVID recovery, as queer people are twice as likely to report being much worse off now than they were in 2019, right? I think, and then preparing for retirement is a lot harder in some communities than others. So I think when I hear those stats, I think the first thing I think about is what's the opportunity? Because it's not all bad, right? There's a lot of great things happening. And so with those stats, what do you think needs to happen in the LGBT community to change some of those? What are the first steps?
Well, I think you bring up a good point, that oftentimes when we start talking about data and information about the LGBT community and money, we can easily gravitate towards the inequities, the wage gaps, the things that are happening that frustrate and anger us. And to be honest, I like to kind of lead with this idea that if we focus our attention on those and we fill our minds with that kind of information, we leave very little space in our conscious and subconscious minds to actually focus on the opportunities, the things that we are doing good as a community, that we are improving upon, all of those kinds of things. And I will just say, from the audience, who here is tired of hearing of these kind of statistics? Like that 48% of us have experienced discrimination. We hear that. And every time we start to talk about this, I want to, and I would invite you all to do that. Let's get this anger out, right? Let's give this a growl, right? We're tired of this, but then let's move on to the things that are positive. One of the statistics that we were totally blown away by the study that we just recently did with the Motley Fool. We surveyed 2005 LGBTQ plus Americans, oversampled for trans and non-binary folks, and the stat that really stood out to us was that 38% of trans folks who were surveyed said that they were earning over $100,000 a year. It's amazing, right? I think that there's some great things that we can learn from this. I think that there is a path for people in our community to earn a living that is sustainable and empowering. Secondly, I think what we're seeing so many folks who have waited. They've put in the time. They've been waiting to get to the financial state when they feel not only financially comfortable, but financially empowered to actually be themselves. Mm-hmm. So I'm so glad that they are starting to do that, and it's a great lesson for the rest of us.
And a lot of that has to do with taking advantage of those resources, right? Because I think I was just in a panel before this with Will, and one of the things that an audience member brought up was access. Like, you can have resources all day long, but if you don't know how to access them, then it's kind of not working for you, right? So we have to find ways collectively as a resource, right? So Debt Free Guys and Experian have a relationship. We have to, along with others in the audience, it's up to us, I think, to find and give and make sure people know how to access those resources. Like your podcast is a great example, right?
Thank you.
Can you tell us how that started? I'm just curious, and I'm sure the audience is too.
Sure. So after David and I started paying off our debt, towards the end of paying off our debt, we decided, with our personal and professional experience, we have sort of a unique perspective here, and we should write a book and put it out there and help other people. And we were naive enough to think that, once you write a book, Oprah Winfrey invites you onto her show, you help millions of people, and your life is set, right?
You get a book.
That's not how it works. And so we shopped the book to about 60 different agents, and we got a lot of positive feedback. But the most glaring feedback was that we just didn't have a platform, whereas we thought the book was the platform. So we started a blog, and about a year later, we went to a finance conference, and we realized that there were all these different, out of 900 people, there were all these different niches: bloggers, podcasters, radio show hosts, whatnot. And they're all speaking to different niches. So you've got your military families, your mommy bloggers, your Christian families, and they're speaking to their particular target market. David and I realized, and several folks told us, that out of the 900 people there, we were the only out LGBTQ people. And up until that point, our LGBTQ-ness was sort of just tangential to our message. So we decided after that to go back and say, what can we do to better serve the community in a more authentic way? And that's when the podcast came about.
That's great. So tell us about other resources that when we think about giving access to populations, what do you think are other resources that come to mind for you?
Well, if you don't mind, I want to just take a stop for just a second. The theme of this year is unstoppable. And I think one of the things that's really important to remember is that money is a tool, and that tool can either make us unstoppable or it can stop us dead in our tracks, depending on how we as individuals or as a community access money, right? How do we use money in our day-to-day lives? And what is really important for queer folks to do right now is to carry this conversation out into our community. LGBT folks are not necessarily talking about money the way we see people of color, especially African American women, are doing an amazing job at educating their brothers and sisters about this is how you use money to empower yourself. And so we are encouraging more folks to get into the space, to talk about money, to encourage the kinds of conversations of, this is the coupons we're using, this is the financial advisor you should go to because they support you for who you are, the way you choose to live your life, or who you love. And when we went to that conversation, or that convention, as John said, we were the first ones or the only ones that were out. In 2019, Capital One sponsored us to do a meetup at that same conference. There were 45 of us. And so in 4 years, we invited that many folks to start talking about money in the LGBT community. let's support those people who are doing it, because those resources then breed more of us to empower each other.
That's right. That's a great point. That's a great
I would add that there are more and more companies who are starting to have this conversation, such as Experian. Capital One has been a great supporter of the queer community. Prudential and MassMutual have both done amazing work for the queer community. So there are slowly more and more resources are becoming available to the community. So start to do the Google, whatever you need to do to try to find who are the appropriate financial support systems that you want to rely on.
That's great. Okay, we have a lot to get to the rest of this session. So thank you guys. Thank you for helping us understand what those resources are, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well that was great, and it kind of leads into our next discussion. So I am going to do some introductions. Come on up, guys. Around who we're going to have. So this is really around storytelling from the LGBTQ community, and we have several different guests, and I'm really honored to welcome these guests on stage. So come on up. I don't know if we're going to have walk-up music. Yes, we are. I am going to start on my far left, and why don't you introduce yourselves, and then we'll get to our questions.
Sure. My name is Kate Anthony. I'm the CEO and founder of Euphoria.
I am Twiggy Pucci Garcon. I use she, her, they, and them pronouns. I serve as the Chief Program Officer at True Colors United. I'm also a filmmaker, producer, and director.
My name is Hillary Knight. I'm an athlete, Olympic medalist, and also a serial entrepreneur.
Nice, nice. So I have prepared questions for each of you, but if you want to chime in, feel free. They're pretty probably questions that are on all of our minds. So I'm going to start with Hillary. What does money or having money mean to you in your world?
I think simply put, it's freedom to be able to choose where you spend your time, and opportunity, having access to different resources, being able to have access to different networks. It really just opens up different doors that you might not necessarily have had if you didn't accumulate, a certain amount of wealth.
Okay, that makes sense. I'll come back to my question. Twiggy, we are so excited to work with you and to address homelessness in the LGBT community. Can you, and youth specifically, can you talk a little bit about that and what the issue is? Because I don't think a lot of people are even aware of that.
Sure. Yeah, our work at True Colors United is to end LGBTQ youth homelessness, and we do that through a systemic approach. We work in advocacy and public policy, training and education for service providers, and we do leadership development with young people who've experienced housing instability or homelessness. LGBTQ young people disproportionately experience homelessness and housing instability in the U.S., an alarming 40% in comparison to their heterosexual counterparts. And so a lot of our work is either directly with politicians to change legislation, or to work with service providers at shelters and housing facilities to make sure that they're safe for LGBTQ young people. I just got back from New Orleans, where we were doing a leadership convening and training with one of our programs, the National Youth Leadership Forum on Homelessness. And so the forum and Experian are partnering on a series of toolkits specifically targeting young people with housing instability experiences around financial literacy.
It's amazing.
Yep.
Thank you for all you do.
Thanks.
I am so excited to hear about Euphoria. I want to hear more about that, and I think the audience does too.
Sure. So 4 years ago, I started a software company called Euphoria. We make apps for transgender people like myself. We've made 6 applications to date, including a healthcare navigator, a tool of psychological affirmation, but perhaps most germane to this conversation, we built a bank. We built a bank for transgender people, and it's the first bank in the world for people like me. So we're really excited. We are just starting to ship our debit cards. It's the first debit card I've ever owned that has my name on it. It's a bank that's free. There's no overdraft fees. It's by us, for us technology. And it's exciting. We're a plucky little startup. We've got, a little bit of seed capital from prominent investors such as Chelsea Clinton and Andy Dunn. But we're well on our way to try to make transgender technology, something that has real staying power.
So that's interesting. Staying power is a word. Those are two words that I've heard now twice this week. And this isn't in the script. I always think about, like, what does that mean for the LGBT community? Because it means something different to probably the Black community versus, the foundational level is the same. But I think to different communities it means something different. And when you think about the transgender community, I'm assuming that they struggle with basic financial knowledge and impediments to get them to where they need to be. So can you talk a little bit about what your app, how did you build that bank, and how did you know that you were onto something when you were starting to build it?
Yeah, so just quick thing. Definitely not a lack of knowledge. My community is very smart. We know what we're doing. We're incredibly smart. It's the impediments that's the issue. So getting through a KYC process when you've had to change your name, that is an inferno if anyone's ever done it. I'm sorry if you've had. So those were just simple things we could look at. What are the discriminatory factors in banking that we can hedge against and push back against? And can we create algorithmic tools that enable people to have easier financial habits? Because when we see someone struggling to afford something, we don't think, oh, they're not good at this. We think to ourselves, the technology's not good enough to make this easier. So it's things like that. And just, in terms of the staying power piece, a woman like me, I'm the first gal into a room that, people can identify as someone like me. And so staying power, to answer that question, means to be a case study and not a cautionary tale.
I like that. Okay. I just have a question. I wanted to ask a question to Hillary around what kind of guidance did you have as a young adult and like growing up around money and finances? And I know that it's different now that you're an athlete and an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
I should have said lifelong.
Lifelong.
Yeah. No, so I was, fortunate enough to have sort of a small family business environment to have my ear in and to learn and to sit at the table and really be a sponge and soak up all this other knowledge. But, I think as athletes, what you see on TV and what you aspire to be is the multi-million-dollar athlete and signing all these big contracts and signing all these big endorsement deals and sponsorships. And to graduate college as a woman, not have a sustainable professional league, and slowly realize, okay, I need to educate myself on how I'm going to sustain myself and play, and then also how I'm going to prepare for retirement and other opportunities that might present themselves along the way. And so that's why I call myself sort of a lifer for entrepreneurial, because it's the same concept. We're just applying it to our smaller space.
And tell us about your new idea. I don't know if it's a new idea, but it's an idea about your entrepreneurship that you're doing with building a new team, I think it is.
Yeah, so a handful of us got together because we were playing in a league that folded, and we've really only had semi-professional women's ice hockey opportunities. And so we got together, we said, let's break this mold. Let's build something, or let's strive to build something that's sustainable and equitable and can provide us all the resources and programming opportunities that we need to set up the next generation. So a handful of us are wearing that hat and doing that daily, but it's extremely encouraging to be in a space with so many empowering people and to know that I'm really encouraged by our progress and where we're going to see the sport grow and become more diverse and inclusive, because hockey isn't traditionally known for those things.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. Speaking of like young people, what are some of the issues that you see in young people in money? I mean, are those systemic issues that as a community that we need to work together on for all generations, but also I think when in your work it's mainly young people, right?
Yeah, I think scalable financial literacy, right, to the point of the project that we're doing with you all. I grew up, I'm Black, I'm Indigenous, I'm queer, and I'm binary. I'm a part of a bunch of different artistic communities, and I was raised by my mom alone. And so I didn't have a financial education around any of the systems, credit, savings, any of it. And so I had to sort of go out in the world and teach myself and find out things as I built my career. And so I think the intentionality around starting that financial literacy and that financial education very, very early and in communities who don't typically have access to it is the way to go.
That's great. That's great. I had another question that I just wanted to ask around, I think when I think about Hillary, I think of, I see you as kind of a big star and celebrity. What kind of money issues, if you can share this, like do you have now, or what kind of is it retirement? Is it saving? What is it that you think about specifically?
Yeah, I think one of the big concerns is, you get to a certain level of visibility and you have people that everyone wants to manage your money, and to be able to sort through what the best fit is, or you also want to stay away from people who are almost predatory in that space as well, because there's all those cautionary tales. But that's one thing. And the other piece of it is retirement. Mm-hmm. And it's far different than any of the male sports, because we're earning less. And that's an actual thing that you sort of have to be able to map out and figure out, I can't play forever. And you sort of have that aha moment that you signed up thinking you can play forever, and your childhood dreams slowly dwindle away, and you're like, okay, what's the next step? What does my career look like after I'm done competing? So definitely those two things.
That's good. In terms of your business, is there anything on investing yet that you're moving into, or because I think that's I've gone to 2 different sessions on that, and I feel like that's something that we don't really talk about until we don't think about it till later. So I'm just curious, have you been thinking about that for your business?
We are. So we're thinking about it in 2 different ways. So one is the very kind of literal here and now investing. And so instead of holding our users' deposits, we're putting them into treasury bills. So they're getting a pretty high yield right now. So every time the feds raise rates, I'm sorry to everyone here who has a mortgage, but to my customers, that's really healthy. So that's a kind of like an intro to investing. And then the way that the application is structured, we're able to help users partition money automatically that goes into those longer term savings vehicles. So yeah, it's just trying to make investing more approachable and kind of, taking the smoke and mirrors out of it in a lot of ways.
That's so important, because I think that we were just in a session talking about how if it's not relatable, people are not going to engage, right? And so I think that goes for youth, I think it goes for athletes, and I think it goes for our community. What ways I'm just curious about, we talk a lot about the younger population, and what ways are you, I know we're working together, but what ways are you looking to do more engagement with younger people?
Me personally, I'm a part of the house and ballroom community, and so this is where Vogan comes from. If you've seen Kiki, that was my film. If you've seen Pose, I choreographed and consulted on it, and so we're a real life group of people around the world that have all these sorts of identities, in the same way I said in my last response, that prevent us from having access to the education. And so one thing that we do, particularly at my house, the House of Garçon, Comme des Garçons, is we do workshops within the house, and we do workshops for the community from our house to other houses.
That's great. How does that actually work? Is it virtual?
Which thing, the workshops?
The workshops, yeah.
Oh yeah, virtual, yep.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, any questions at this point from the audience, or virtually? Do we have the virtual person? No questions? Will? I don't know if we have runners. Shonda, Will has a question. Grace? Will?
I'll take it. You were selecting someone else. All right, I'll try to get my question together faster. So I think this idea of a bank for trans people is really great, but I am going to look into it and find out more. But in my community in Boston, the way we get things done is by mutual aid, and not through the nonprofit system. And anytime a bank comes up, it's my bank overdrafted me. It's, I can't pay my phone bill because I'm overdrafted. Please help me, send me money through Cash App, right? How do we, I'd be really interested in hearing, how do you think banks repair their image with broke trans youth?
Thank you. First and foremost, those are incredibly important points. I'll try to hit them with a degree of brevity. First and foremost, to the overdraft fees, we don't do them. If you don't have sufficient funds, the card is declined. There's no fees, and every bank can do that. They have the power and the capacity to do that, so to all my competitors, steal that idea from me. The second thing we can do is that, we're a for-profit company. We got to make money, right? So debit cards create this magical thing called interchange. So the privilege of these vendors to be able to swipe the card, typically your average bank will take back all the interchange. We're splitting it with the user. So even on a debit card, you're getting 50 basis points per transaction back. So it's a tax-free solution. We're not nickeling and diming people, and we're sharing the wealth. And so that's just the start. We've got a lot more work to do. And so what we're trying to do is set up a model that others can replicate, and that we can be a little bit of an aspirational beacon so people can be like, hey, Euphoria has figured out what does banking look like in a healing capacity. We're going to do the same. So that's our approach for now. But hopefully we're just going to get better and better. And particularly because of folk like you raising those points, that's how we're able to do it. So thank you.
My question is a follow-up to a comment, Hillary, you made. You were talking about, as you began to amass wealth, the people that came to try to help you manage your money and trying to avoid the predatory people. How do you decide? Like, what criteria do you use? Is it referral? Like, how do you figure it out?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I'd say doing different conferences and working in different spaces, everyone is really quick to toss the business card, right? And it's the perceived wealth, too, because you're more of a public figure, that people assume that you're multi-million or however much you have in your bank account. And so it really becomes one of these things that if I don't know you and you're not in that circle, and this is a space that, I don't have a referral or know someone that does know you, I'm probably not going to work with you, which is sort of unfortunate because you do miss out on different opportunities of, brilliance that you might miss along the way. But, just having different friends and people I've gone to college to make poor decisions because they were ill-advised, and someone who was supposed to be a professional in the room wasn't necessarily who they were supposed to be. So that's just sort of one of those cautionary things that's always in the back of my mind, is everyone wants to sort of be a part of that or be in a picture, and you really have to sift through, one, if it aligns with what your mission is, and then two, if they're actually good at what they do, because you just want to surround yourself with good people.
We have a question from the virtual audience, I believe.
We do. We do. How does the bank offer services like loans for transitioning cost and balancing that a lot of trans folks don't have really good credit?
Yeah, so that's something that we're currently developing. So y'all are about to see behind the curtain real quick. So the model that we're really betting on is a peer-to-peer loan lending model. So we think we can do the origination and kind of have a faux underwriting capacity on it. But the biggest thing is, how do we look at people who are further in their journey, who have the capacity to be able to put out these loans, and then be able to reap the rewards a little bit. We're talking a pretty marginal interest rate. And so that keeps the money within the community. But even in the risk of someone defaulting on one of those loans, what's the worst thing that happened? A little bit of my money helped out one of my siblings. That's worth the investment or loan risk to me. So that's how we're thinking about it, but loan capacity is something that is on the roadmap. So maybe invite me back next year and we can chat about it more.
Any other questions from the audience at this point? One in the front. Let her go.
So when it comes to youth, right, a lot of the issues that the community has is because they start at a disadvantage whether because they get kicked out of the home, or they have to grow up really fast, really quick, and become adults when they should still be kids, essentially, right? What kind of help programs do your organization and the people you work with have to make sure that we set them up right and give them the opportunities to become good with money by actually having money to be good with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the key tenets of our work is that we want young people with lived experience, and we call it expertise, to be centered in creating solutions to end youth homelessness. We are not a service provider, so let me just put that over here so that help position where we are in the movement. So we work with service providers to develop those types of supportive programs, and we have pushed sort of this tenet in the work in youth homelessness, where now every program who has what we call youth action boards or youth leadership programs are paying those young people to be a part of those programs. And so people who are a part of the forum are on a retainer every month for the work that they do alongside True Colors.
I'd like to answer that question, just add on to what you just said around education, I think is really important. And one of the things that we do is that, we work with foster youth at Experian. And so foster youth, they get kicked out of their foster youth home at the time they emancipate at 18. And then they're, I think 50% of them are all basically, they have a lot of identity theft by the time they're 18. Their biological parents or their foster youth could steal their identities. And so we have a lot of data on this. But I think about this audience a lot because I think they're another forgotten audience, right? And once they emancipate, they don't know how to, unless someone's taught them, they don't know how to write a check. They don't know how to get a debit card. They don't know how to do anything for the most part. So we actually we work with different local nonprofits in different areas, a couple of them, and we help them get the education they need to how do you run an apartment? How do you find an apartment? How do you find the right bank that works for you? And then we also give them free credit reports when they're ready to start their credit journey. So, I mean, it is a big population, but I'm just trying to give you an example of how I think education is a big piece of that. And I know 100%. You do a lot of that, but education and engagement is really important. And I think the more simple you keep it for the younger generation, the better, because it can be very complex and it can be very scary. So that's another aspect to that. We have a question in the front.
What mechanism did you all find the most helpful when learning about how to manage your own money personally?
I say this from a place of privilege, a failure. So I think so much of my financial literacy has come from a place that I've screwed up a lot. I've accrued a fair bit of credit card debt. Hey, debt-free guys, let's talk after this. And so yeah, I think that's where the learnings come from. I never had someone teach me how to write a check, but I had a bank teach me what a bounce check looks like. So yeah, that's kind of been the greatest teacher to date. Maybe not the best way to do it, but it worked.
Was that one of your inspirations for starting your own company too, in terms of being able to help people in that capacity?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I looked at my company's based on my own lived experiences. I came out about 8 years ago. I got fired on the spot for it, and had to really shuffle really quickly to be able to stay alive and stay afloat. So there wasn't really any digital infrastructure available for souls like mine. So I'm just well, maybe I built it and we could do something. And the first app took off and turned out to be a hit. So yeah, in a roundabout way, I would say it was definitely molded from those experiences.
Yeah, I'd say having people pour into me, having community members, having chosen family, having people who either learn themselves or have been taught, be very intentional about passing on that knowledge, and so I do the same thing.
Yeah, I'd say my parents had a big hand in guiding me, and then also learning from mistakes. a lot of it is figuring out how to problem solve on the fly, and unfortunately, you hope that you don't have more mistakes than you do successes. So definitely experiential learning.
Yeah, I don't know if you're asking me, but I will just because their feedback is much more important. But when I went to college, I'll never forget that there was a fair, and there was a particular credit card they were offering, and I racked up $12,000 worth of debt within 1 quarter. And I got a free towel, though. That was the main thing. I got a free towel and $12,000 worth of debt. So my funny story and my screw up, my big screw up. Aaron?
When speaking to queer youth around understanding finance or money, what would you say, what would you help them with around the biggest misconception that you've learned?
I think we're figuring that out. This partnership that we're doing with Experian is our first foray into this as an area of focus. We have done things with the young people that are in our program specifically, but to open up this conversation to like the young people that the programs are serving, specifically around financial literacy, is new. And so the forum is helping us figure that out, to be completely honest. So we'll see very soon.
We have 2 questions in the front, middle, 3.
Thank you. I just had a question on do you educate like maybe the youth on how to spread the wealth within the community? So I know I live in Chicago, so I try to like look up like stores. It's like, are they like lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer? I mean, sometimes I'm in a place of privilege now that I make enough money to sustain myself, and now I just want to just support it and spread the wealth, not only by like donating, but also by purchasing products from people part of the community. So do you educate maybe your youth in that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, in like their everyday practice, but also we practice that as an organization. We prioritize working with vendors who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, femme, trans, women-led. So we do that as an organization, and also suggest the same for young people in their day-to-days, yeah.
We have one virtual question, and then we'll go to yours, the microphone.
When you've entered the workforce, but you still haven't yet amassed enough of a nest egg to be a client for most financial planners, how do you find that financial planning assistance while you're still in that place of becoming independent?
Yeah, so this is just my experience, so take it with a grain of salt. A good financial planner should not be charging you. A good financial planner should understand your finances and be taking a long-term bet on you. So if you're up and coming and you're young and you find someone like that and they say, hey, I'm going to charge you for my time, they are not worth your time. Instead, they should be able to say, hey, if I have a relationship with you for 30, 40 years, I can make a ton of money because when you're successful, I'm successful.
Mm-hmm. Good answer.
Hi, my name is Josh Schneider. He's he, him pronouns. I'm with Medtronic. So my question is, for all of you, you have to seek out sources of external funding sometimes to accomplish what you want to accomplish, either with your business or being a serial entrepreneur, or with kind of a nonprofit. How do you kind of in your like queer experience, or how do you convince kind of external partners to take a bet on you and that your dreams are worth funding?
It's a really good question. I'd say the biggest thing that has separated our success as an organization with we call ourselves the PWHPA, is just our tenacity to continue to accept a no, and to be able to have a relentless sort of spirit about us to knock on the next door and really convey our mission, and to be very succinct and clear on how we want to grow the space and how we want to change it. And fortunately, we've found success in the last few years to be able to bring the right partners and brands on board to be able to build towards what we want to have as our ultimate goal as a sustainable professional league.
Yeah, I say on both sides of my career, it's about centering the people who live this experience. And so What the one thing that True Colors does really well is not only center young people, but we don't try and do too many things, right? And so that gives us a reputation of being really good at the things we do. And then on the film and TV side, I think with seeing now more than ever that particular communities are starting to be immersed in the writer's room and getting bigger credits with producing and directing. And so I think for any of the projects I've been privileged to work on in that regard, starting from there, like starting from conceptualizing the concept into the pitch from the beginning and not trying to play catch up later.
Yeah, so with like respect to external funding, like it's hard in the venture space, particularly. Like I think the current existing stat is like women get only 2% of venture funding, and then you add a horrible exponent if you happen to be a woman who's trans. You know, there's just not a lot of dollars going to gals like me or to anyone of the community. So our approach was to be so good they couldn't ignore us. And so when most would approach like a VC for like a seed round with 1,000 users, we approached them with 100,000 users. So we just decided that we were going to be so dominant that they could not shut down their normal objections to us. And it worked. It took a lot of rejections. I mean, we got 300-400 no's from VC firms, but luckily I've got a pretty indelible face, so that was really helpful to go back to these people and be like, hey, remember me? I did what you said I couldn't. Now write me a check.
Hi, my name is Matt. I have pronouns he, him. I would kick myself in the butt if I didn't do this. So I'm a financial advisor. You are absolutely right. They should not be charging. My whole focus of my practice is the LGBTQ plus community, especially the trans community as clients. Come see me if you would like to talk. And I don't charge. You shouldn't. You should be taking it on as something that you're looking at as a lifetime responsibility and relationship. And so I am that type. So come see me. Network. Yeah.
We have a virtual question real quick.
Our virtual audience is interested in the topic of estate planning, but this is more of a human, in the moment, existential kind of question, especially in our community with what's happening and the challenges that we're facing right now. How do you plan for the future and maintain that hope? And is this where we bring in #unstoppable?
That's a good one that I'm not going to take.
So the question was about how do we keep that hope going right now?
Yeah, as it relates to individual estate planning, like if you're not sure what all the variables are going to bring you if you're going to have to move out of state or that kind of stuff. How do you keep planning for the future, for retirement? Yeah,
it's hard because like I think that one of the things that being part of the community is that we are forced to live in moment by moment because we're just not sure where the road's going to run out. We're not sure what horrible things come down the pipe. So I do think it becomes a little bit like abstract and nebulous, and so that's where planning for the future can become a little bit more difficult. The way I personally do it is I think about the next Kate that's going to walk into a space, and she needs me to exist. She needs me to prove out that someone like me can make it to retirement, and she needs me to be able to make pathways and solutions that are going to make her life easier. So it's an optimism bred by the altruism I have for our own community, which is one of the things I think is really unique about us as a cohort, is that we care about each other. So that's how I keep the hope alive. Keep the faith, because we're in this together.
That's a good answer.
Good day. I'm Clint Faust, he, him, from American Airlines. With a company upwards of over 130,000 employees, we have a theme of caring accountability when it comes to managing our team members. And with stories like the Debt-Free Guys and you managing of such a variety of startup teams, business units, and even Experian with a large practice, do you think financial responsibility is ever in the conversation when it comes to your own team members and sort of living your own practice, like we talked about with their story?
I'll start. This is something that we're working on. I think financial health and mental health go together, and I think that we have a big focus on mental health at Experian, and so part of that is taking care of our team's mental health, and also that goes along with their financial health. So one of the things that Will and I, the Chief Diversity Officer, my partner in crime, we've been talking about is how do we do that internally and share that message so everybody knows that what the benefits are, what do they need to do for estate planning, when that question came in. So I think for us as an organization, we are really looking at it from a long-term planning, but also mental health and financial health going together. So we're working on a series of virtual webinars and in-person webinars when we can to help our employees within the walls of Experian. And then that makes our employees on the outside more productive and more able to spread that as an advocate for financial health. Did that answer your question? Does anybody else want to talk about that? Okay.
Actually, do you mind if I wanted to cover a couple of the points? First, the one about estates, and I can't remember who had asked that question. On an episode of the Queer Money podcast, we interviewed Liz Schwartz, who is a family practice lawyer out of Florida and was instrumental in helping change laws in Florida for the LGBT community. And Liz wrote a book, and I am forgetting the name of the book, but it's something to the effect of what you should know before you say I do. And what I think was really important about the conversation that we were having with Liz on the podcast was this whole idea of our community is going to take steps forward, and there are going to be times when we take steps back. Just because we are taking a step back because we're being forced back doesn't mean that we don't have hope that we are going to keep moving forward. And so we should always be prepared with what it is that we need to do. So I would encourage whoever asked the question, and for the rest of you, to find Liz's book. It's available on Amazon. Again, I think it's called What You Should Know Before I Say I Do, or some Before You Say I Do. Oh, he must have looked it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Secondly, the comment about education in the workplace. That's a passion that John and I have. The recent study that we did with Motley Fool found that 2 out of every 3 LGBT people go to work every single day or every week stressed about their finances, which means we can come to work feeling like we want to be our best selves, but there's something outside of work that's preventing us. And we're working to try to help change that. If you want to talk to us about that later, we definitely would. But I think what is important is that we need to have these kinds of conversations with our colleagues, right? We need to talk to our colleagues about not just about how much we are earning when it comes to transparency, but what our financial lives are like as a community, how we can empower each other, how can we help each other, how can we be the shoulder to cry on, the arm to lift each other up when we need that kind of help.
Thank you. One more question. Right in the front row.
That's okay. I'd love to end on a happy note if this is the last question. So I think we all define financial success very differently. And I would just love to know from your perspectives, what does it mean to be thriving for all of you? And what do you attribute to yourselves that will get you to that point? Whether that's how you feel or what it looks like or what you can do for others. Thank you.
For me, financial success would be for me to be able to choose what I want to do with my time and have the flexibility to decide to go see or travel or spend time doing whatever it is that I want to do or work on or have more passion projects. So when I said earlier, what does money mean to me? That goes into my freedom bucket, to have the freedom to be able to choose how I want to spend time.
Yeah, it resonates a lot. with me your statement about the connection between financial health and mental health. And I think as a person who's experienced housing instability, a person who's gotten through addiction, I think for me it's about not worrying about going back to either of those things because I feel so stable.
Yeah, so the financial success, at least in my world, it means that I can continue to afford my health care. That's a pretty big one. But the other one is just to have the means to be able to, be my unfettered self. And so what that constitutes as is having like $20 in a banking account and being able to buy a $10 dress from Target. It's the simple things, it's just the means to actually be able to live. So I don't put a number on it, I just put my happiness on it.
Love it.
That's beautiful.
Great panel. Thank you, guys. Thank you. We're going to let Dina come back on stage and close this out, so thank you very much. And thanks for being a great audience, too. Appreciate it.
No, it's okay. No, thank you all for being here. Oh, you okay? I just want another round of applause for this extraordinary team. The whole Experian team that is here. While, like I said, you're not leaving with more money in your pocket, you're leaving with something much more valuable, this sort of, teach a man to fish mantra. And so hopefully you all were enriched by this. I think particularly the level of candor in terms of the barriers that you all faced and what you shared, will have a lasting impact. Next year at this time, between Out and Equal and Experian, we will have original research on this topic that we're confident is going to further this conversation in very meaningful ways. And we will have even more success stories of people overcoming these barriers and illuminating a path along the way for other folks. So again, thank you all. Thank you to our panelists, to Experian. Oh, and to our debt-free guys, absolutely. Thank you all so much. So again, we will see you at Gala. It's business festive or queer festive, is that right, Jen? That's it, okay. Thank you all. See you in just a few hours.